Should people take one side or the other and fight for that side, or should people take the side of peace and humanity? Which of those is more likely to lead toward peace?
It's one of the biggest problems right now that people abroad are very invested in. That's amazing, and we need you guys, but people are choosing to see the reality very black and white, and that's very dangerous. We need people on the pro-human rights side. And I think that it's important to say that looking at both sides is not necessarily seeing them as equal, and it doesn't erase all the blame and the responsibility. I think that looking at both sides is seeing where each side is at fault, what are the problems, seeing the bigger picture of what led to this point. And I think that's where people should be on the pro-human rights side and amplify the non-violent voices. That's what we need right now.
Be pro-solution. It's easy to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, but be pro-solution. For people to be pro-solution, we activists on the ground, we needed to make it very clear. Our message to the international community, we are not ready to pay more prices of our identity, existence, or security because of the gap that people in the diaspora are creating by taking sides. And we need the international community commitment to solution, especially Jews and Muslims around the world, not in our name. Hate is not in our name. Divide is not in our name. Just imagine, in Washington, D.C., 1 million Jews and Muslims marching the streets to put up Russia in Biden, to be pro-solution more than being pro-those or pro-that. This can work, because when Jews stand up for Palestinian, the State Department will listen. When Muslims stand up for Jews, they will listen much better than we speak for ourselves.
We are here today with Ali Abu Awwad. He's one of the most, if not the most prominent Palestinian nonviolence activists currently living in the West Bank, founder of Tagir, which means change, which is an organization and a movement for the nonviolent resolution of the Israel-Palestine conflict based on Gandhian principles. And I believe that you were relatively influenced by Gandhi. Is that right, Ali?
Yes, absolutely.
What's your philosophy on nonviolence and where did it come from?
Well, nonviolence for me is the celebration of my existence and my people existence. And in general, it's the art of our humanity as human being. And it gives the taste and the meaning of our humanity, because everyone is a human being. But I'm not sure that everyone is acting as a human being. Being a nonviolent person is to identify with our humanity more than anything else, which is the highest value of our existence in this planet and in this short life. What gives me a taste to wake up in the morning every day, that I know that I could be the prisoners of my victimizer, or I can be the free soul that will achieve my goal in my life. And even if I don't achieve this goal of independence, freedom, and security for all the people of this land, it's the way that I choose to spend it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful statement of the personal and spiritual aspect of nonviolence. Do you feel there's also an effectiveness aspect to the philosophy of nonviolence, meaning that you feel it's more effective than the tactic of using violence to achieve political goals?
Definitely, especially in our conflict, considering the complexity and the background and the narrative of both sides, then you realize it's just by nonviolence, and you don't have to be a peacemaker to realize that. I mean, we are so intertwined, both people with different identities in this only land where we both belong, and no one is gonna go anywhere. Even worse than that, people will fight until the last drop of blood, because this is the only place where we can thrive and exist. So yeah, for me, having said that, means that we don't need to be big political leaders to realize the political fact that this conflict cannot be solved by violence. And by the way, many conflicts can be solved by violence and by militant actions, but there will be nothing to live for. I mean, the destroy and the damage that can be created, you will need tens, if not hundreds of years to heal that. And what is winning here? I don't want a freedom to be built on hundreds of Jewish graves. And I don't want Jewish security to be built on my dignity and freedom. This is a fact that manage all of my life and my thoughts and my philosophy and even my movement.
I tend to agree. I think that violence just breeds more violence, and that the only way out of this kind of conflict is nonviolence. I wonder how you came to this realization and what your story is since you were a kid. I remember hearing that you had originally participated in violent protests as a kid, and maybe in the first Intifada, and then you were imprisoned. I'd like to hear more about your story and the
Yes,
evolution of this.
I was born as a refugee in the West Bank after my family were thrown out of our town, Kibeba, which is in Israel today. Was born to a very political mother. My mother used to be one of the leaders of PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, and I participated in the first Intifada actually not because of politics. I saw the humiliation of my mother in front of my eyes when I was a child. She was arrested for several times by the Israeli army and security forces. And it didn't take me a minute to participate. In 1987, I started throwing stones on Israeli soldiers. And I have never considered this as a violence act, even though, I mean, throwing a stone at a human being can kill him, but throwing a stone in a 60 Merkava ton, like, that's insane. It was more my scream to be free, my scream against injustices, and my scream for my legitimate rights as a human being to live where my rights are in harmony of my life. And this is my relation to the conflict, and I cannot go for details because if I do so, it will need like days to explain why Palestinian kids throw themselves on the street facing their death by throwing rocks and on very armed, trained soldiers. But on the other hand, there was something inside me seeking for a dignified role to practice my political identity as a Palestinian, which I didn't see any platform work of it. So I just throw myself in the conflict. I was arrested with my mother. I face a very hard torture, humiliation by the security officers, as well as my mother. And they put me for years in the Israeli prison because I refused to give evidence against my mother. And actually going to prison for me was like shocking. Especially they gave me 10 years to prison as a matter of revenge because I refused to give evidence. I was just 17 years old. I always wanted to travel, to study, to have a normal conditions. I have never thought to kill a human being or to hurt a human being. And then I was broken, totally broken. I lost everything, lost future, lost dignified conditions. And the meaning of my existence, I lost it by being in prison. And I lost my study. I wanted to study, and I had an insane Palestinian dream that time to become a pilot. And Palestinian couldn't be pilots. I mean, we have no passport, we have no recognition, and we even consider as terrorist or dangerous by many countries around the world. Anyway, I went to prison with my broken heart and dreams, and I found out that I was going to one of the best universities that you can imagine, because Palestinian political prisoners has turned the prison to one of the best universities, honestly. You have to study, you have to, prisoners will examine you, you have to read books, learn languages. My English, most of it came from there. My Hebrew came from there. And, month after month, I become so busy with the system to the level that when I used to tell my friends outside that I'm sorry for not being in touch because I'm so busy, they couldn't understand what the hell I'm talking about. And that was my real word that educate me just to become a better human being. And month after month, I wanted to visit my mother in her other prison, where Israel always refused, which was illegal even by the Israeli law. Then we decided to go for a hunger strike to see each other. A hunger strike of 17 days of starvation. And by the end of it, we managed to get Israel to agree that we will meet. I met her for 45 minutes, and all of this pain has just disappeared. And then I came back to my prison very confused, very conflicted, because I thought that what has been taken by force should be achieved back by force. Until that minute, I realized that with all of my right cause and right beliefs of my legal rights, I was blind to the rightest weapon that I have never used, which was my humanity. In hunger strike, you don't harm anyone. You just harm yourself. But the goal is not to suicide. The goal and the deepest message in that you are telling your jailer, you're telling your oppressor that whatever you're gonna do, I'm gonna embarrass you among your own humanity because I'm not gonna do the same what you do to me. And you become the reflection of him, like you become a mirror of his humanity. I always said that in nonviolence, if you think that our humanity is our weapon, you're doing a big mistake. It's our enemy's humanity in nonviolence, but you have to be able to bring it out where your rights are not argumental anymore by him. So I started learning nonviolence in prison, and then I was released by Oslo Peace Initiative. And this process of having hope really has failed for many reasons. Until 2000, when we still could see the occupation is going on and on with no hope. The second intifada started in 2000, where I have decided not to take realistic part because it didn't speak about me. But on the other hand, I couldn't have also a normal conditions. So I was stuck until one day I was badly wounded by an Israeli settler near Hebron, evacuated to Saudi Arabia for medical treatment, and learning that my brother Yusuf, 31 years old, was trying to come back home, were stopped by a group of Israeli soldiers and very violently murdered with no reason. At that minute, I faced the biggest exam of my life. Am I truthful to my beliefs of nonviolence, or shall I just give up everything and take revenge? And especially, revenge was the priority because, these people came, occupy my land, turn us to their victims, to be their victims. And I have all the right on earth to take revenge for many reasons, not just for my loss. But on the other hand, I'm still me. I'm still a human being. I'm not a murderer. And how do I do with that? How can I wake up in the morning? For what? So I was struggling between both of these values of life, humanity, and revenge. Until one day, my mother actually hosted a group of Israeli bereaved families people who have lost someone in the conflict in 2002. And for me, that was the first time, and believe me when I say that, I sit in my home with Jewish people and I saw a Jewish person crying. I couldn't imagine even that Jews has fears, tears, or fears, or feelings until that minute. And then all what I have been struggling with, because I wanted to feed this monster inside me by labeling the other of not being human beings. But that minute, this bereavement has brought us together to the level that I realized that we're sharing the same humanity. Yes, we're not sharing the same life conditions. Even politically, our relation is unequal at all. But we are, by the end of the day, equal by what we are sharing under the ground. And I realize, actually, because of that, and because we are not able to share what is on the ground, we are just sharing what we have underground, which is the bodies of our beloved ones. I have decided to do everything possible for both sides to be able to share what is on the ground.
Wow, thank you. Part of what you were mentioning at the beginning of your story as a young Palestinian kid throwing rocks, you mentioned that you can't really go into the details of why Palestinian kids throw rocks because it's very deep. But I think it is important for people to understand and for us to understand as peace activists also what is driving violence on both sides. And one thing that I've seen, I have relatives in Israel as an example, and I know how they think and what they think. And a lot of people on the Israeli side believe that the violence is mainly because of, Islamic fundamentalism, where people believe that, that they should conquer the land for Islam. But I know that, as from all the Palestinian people I've talked to, that's not what it's about. It's about, this was our land and it was taken from us and we're now under occupation and oppressive conditions. Do you feel that both of these are factors in the violence, that the kids that are throwing rocks as an example, on the Palestinian side, or do you feel it's one or the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I think when people have life where they're all of their conditions is just miserable. And when I say miserable, you live in a house that doesn't have water, while people on the other side have swimming pools. It takes you 3-4 hours to reach your school. Just as a child, you see your mother get beaten in front of your eyes, or your brother get killed by the army, by the extreme settlers, and you experience an existence with no future. You cannot even imagine a normal future because your world is about just humiliation, injustices. Then you lose your fear to die. When people lose fear to die because they lost their meaning of existence, life has no meaning anymore, especially for kids who grab a knife and go to stab soldiers, and they know in advance that most of them will get killed before even touch the soldier. They know that. But they have lost their fear to die. This fuel violence and they don't identify with it. They have not been born. They were not born for this. They born to live normally like any human being. So that's number one. Number two, when you belong to a nation that paid prices of their existence for another nation to exist on the same land, and you compromise, and this is what happened when we in Oslo recognized Israel, but we didn't recognize the occupation. And when the occupation go on, and then we lose our hope of any peace possible with Israelis, then violence become the language and the response. Number three, the Jewish fear itself. We live with the Jewish fear. We face this fear every day, and we pay the price of Jewish fear. Actually, the Jewish fear has become our biggest enemy. It's not the Jews themselves. It's their fear that has been implemented in politics by someone like Netanyahu. He's a manager of Jewish fear. He's not a manager of Jewish future in this land. That's what I believe. Number 4, when you lose your direction, that you don't have in your society any platform that will adopt you and raise you in normal conditions to be a better person for your future, and you have a failure of your own political leadership with corruption, with misleading, with all of that, then violence becomes the answer. And finally, when the international community, big part or powerful parts of it, keep investing in this conflict, where Jews and Arabs are paying the price of their blood and their future because of international politics, investing in hate, because this conflict is a good environment for outsiders to invest for their own politics, then violence is the answer. By the end of the day, for that and for many other reasons, look where we are. If violence was the answer, we would have been able to solve this conflict many years ago. And by the way, it's never about ideology. It's never about Islam or Judaism. I know that both religions were created by the same God. And I know that there is no religion on earth support killing of innocent people, but there are politicians who use religion to justify their act of violence and militant and humiliation against others. On the other hand, to be an extremist, I'm not sure you need a specific ideology. I'm not sure even you need, if you live such conditions like my conditions, I'm not sure you need a specific curriculum to hate. It does make the job for you, even without a religion, without an ideology. And finally, I know that this conflict has religious roots, but it's not a religious conflict. So we need those leaders and those religious leaders to be part of a political approach that will manage the solution in a political platform. And my proof to all of those who say we use Islam, we are fanatics, we are extremists, the constitution that we voted for after Oslo was a secular one. I have never considered my society as a religious society, but the culture is much deeper than religion itself. So before people judge and label you, they have to understand. And for people to understand, we have to be a just lawyer for a just case. We cannot be a bad lawyer for a just case, especially there is injustice in the international court.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer, Ali. I'd like to admit now into the conversation Einat Gerlitz. Einat, I'm going to click the admit button now. She's joining us from Israel. I just want to introduce Einat for a moment because she's joining us now from Israel. She is a conscientious objector from the Israeli army, the IDF. In Israel, conscientious objectors are called refuseniks, which means you're refusing to join the army for moral reasons. And I believe that in general, the refuseniks are put in jail by the Israeli government because they don't recognize conscientious objectors as a legitimate reason not to join the army. So, Einat, is that about right? And how were you put in jail? And if so, for how long?
Yeah, that's true. I was imprisoned for 87 days in total. I refused in September 4th, 2022. But basically, when I refused, I had no idea if I'm going to go in for 2 years or for 2 weeks. The law doesn't say for how much time you're going to sit. So I was sentenced 4 different times in a total of 87 days. But now I have a friend, Talmidnik, who's sitting, he's going to almost finish 105 days, and there's still no hope for an exemption. So it really differs.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like they're getting more intense since the war started.
Hmm.
So, not just to catch you up, we were talking about nonviolence. I know that's a big part of your own philosophy. So, I want to ask you some questions about that as well, and t start talking between all three of us about maybe ways that we can move toward peace. The conversation I was just having with Ali was about how many Israelis believe that the source of the violence from the Palestinian side is because of radical Islam, jihad, and things like that. But Ali was explaining that actually, in reality, a lot of the violence is coming, or most, or if not all of the violence is coming because of the oppressive occupation and the oppression that the Palestinians have had to go through over the past 80 years or so. So, Einat, just is that recognized on in the Israeli side near you? Do people think where you are that it's that the Palestinian violence is mainly because of radical Islam and jihad, or do they recognize that it's because of the occupation and the oppression?
Because like it's seen as because of the radicalization and the fundamental Islam. But like I'm in the nonviolent field. That's where I focus on.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So I think personally that if Israelis, if it's true, and I think what Ali is saying is true, if it's true that the occupation is the source of the violence, I think, and if the Israelis realize that, then they would start to realize that maybe if we actually stop doing, building walls and occupying and doing all this intense security stuff, that the violence can stop on that side, and then we can move toward peace. So I'm happy that Ali has explained that so clearly that it's really mainly that the violence is chiefly coming from the occupation and from the oppression. So do you think, Einat, do you think that that's something that can be communicated to the Israeli people in a way that they would understand and hopefully be able to move away from the oppressive security measures?
I don't think that you can say that all the violence is justified as because the Palestinians are under oppression. I think it's one of the main reasons, not the only one. I believe in nonviolence, and I think that the hope is going to come from there. And I think like violence is always problematic and never brings a solution as how I see it. And of course, that a nation that's under occupation for 75 years and under a siege is under a lot of pressures. And that's one of the reasons, but not the only reason for violence. I think there are many reasons. Some of them come from fundamentalism in the religion, just as in the Israeli society that we have crazy, scary fundamentalistics on the right that are using Judaism as a justification for violence. So I think we can see that in many different religions. So like as everything in life, there's many reasons. Yeah, but I really do believe that the only way to stop this circle of violence, a circle of blood, is working together and being in solidarity one like with each other and continuing the nonviolence resistance even at the hardest times. I think that staying humane and looking to the injustices in the eye is the most important thing that we can do, and to raise up our voices and not to let the violent and then revenge motivated mainstream like take the whole stage. So I'm trying from where I am as part of the Misavot network, the Refuses network, and also in activities in the South Gabon Hills with a community there that there's a strong nonviolent resistance going on for the past 2 decades at least, and I really believe that that's where the solution is going to come from.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go to Ali for a moment and ask, Einat was mentioning that she thinks that the violence stems from multiple causes on both sides and in every conflict. And I think it's important for us to understand, is this true is there some of it that comes from jihadist fundamentalism and some of it that comes from the occupation and the oppression? Because it's good for us to understand the truth of the matter so that we can hopefully find solutions that can ensure security for everybody as we move into the peace process and move into hopefully lasting peace. So the question is, do you think that it's true that there are multiple factors to the violence besides the occupation and the oppression? Do you think it's also there is jihadist fundamentalism driving some of the violence?
Well, as I told you, violence has never been an identity for people here, neither for Palestinian also for Jewish people. I think the mentality and the psyche of both people has more humanity than violence. And believe me, after 23 years of engagement with so many Israelis and Jewish people around the world, with so many Muslims, I realized that this is a political conflict, that religion has been invested in a bad way. And religious people, whether religious leaders become politicians, and this is where God get upset, or politicians speaking by the name of religion. And there is so much investment in the political conflict in religious values. When you mention Jerusalem, problem of Jerusalem is not a religious problem, it's a political problem. But it has religious values that has been like preventing us to reach a political management. On the other hand, in every religion, you can find 100 reasons to kill, and you can find 1,000 reasons to reconcile. It's up to you. It's up to the people. Because when you decide to kill someone, you don't justify it. You don't need God to justify that, because you are ready. There are many other Muslims and Muslim countries. They're not fanatics. Look at Emirates today. They are normalizing the relation, and they did normalize with Israel. It's a fake normalization, right? I mean, it's just between politicians, but the people are not there. Look at Qatar, Kuwait, I mean, Indonesia, all of these Islamic countries. They're not fanatics, but it's up to the system and it's up to the world how to view that. For me as a Muslim, I'm telling you, killing innocent people doesn't represent my case. My case is more moral and just than to be represented in a fanatical way. On the other hand, I believe that Einat and many, many others exist. I believe in the humanity of my enemies before the humanity of my own people. That's why the Palestinian nonviolence approach can work and can achieve my rights more than any violence. By the end of the day, any management of this conflict, when our politician hopefully will get enough pressure on them to sit on the table and take hard decisions, they don't need God to be there. They don't even will not sign the agreement in the name of God or in the name of Judaism or Islam. They will sign a political agreement. And this is the society where I live, and I live with Christian, I live with Jews, and I know that there is no justification for killing. But sometimes we are stuck, as I told you, we're stuck with the Jewish fear, with the Jewish lack of trust, with the Jewish and Israeli justification of the occupation under security. That's why in my manifesto, I raised two important questions. Questions among Palestinians and questions to the Israeli Jewish people. I tell Palestinians, do you recognize the legitimate Jewish identity on this land? Because we can start from there to build any future agreement. On the other hand, I ask Israelis, are you occupying people for security, or are you occupying land for ideology? Because if it's for security, then it's me and your responsibility. If it's about ideology, this is to argue with God, right? It means that it's unsolved. We cannot solve it. So Israelis today has to decide. This occupation is about security. It has never promoted security. Palestinian has to decide, are we able to recognize the Jewish belonging to this land, where we can build a lasting peace? Because peace for me is not about borders. You know, the best thing that this horrible act of right-wings and right-wing government and violence, that they brought on the table something that we were hiding. They brought identity. Today, we need to negotiate and discuss identity more than behaviors. Occupation is behavior. We should not be denying each other identities, but we should take responsibility for each side behavior. I'm ready to take responsibility for my people violent, but I need a partner who will take responsibility about the occupation, and not by good intentions, not by flying to to Greece for a nice peace conference in 5-star hotel. I'm done with that. We need a strategic thinking with a massive action that will bring our identities to the harmony of life. So peace for me is a place where these two legitimate identities will fit in a political design that no one has to pay the price of his security, dignity, freedom, or nationality. This is peace for me. Any politician will design that, he will be my hero. But you know what? There will be no politician to do that as long as we still, the game of blame, the competition of suffering, who suffers more, we are all victims. Let's agree about that. We are all victims. And by the way, me and Anat are not the minority. We are the minority who represent the silent majority, because the majority are silent.
The violence is many times screaming louder, even though I think in most people's hearts they do believe in what we're speaking about. I completely agree with you, Ali. I think that the only way to start to move toward a solution is for all of us to start seeing our blames and where we're in fault, and to take responsibility, and to see the other side's pain. I think that's one of the biggest problems here, that we grow up very separated. We don't know enough of each other's history, and what we do know many times is very manipulated, and we're just not able to, when we grow up, to know each other's true culture and history and our pains. So the Israelis and the Palestinians, many people feel as if they're the only victims and the other side is completely to blame. And I think a lot of times it makes people be very closed-minded because that's what they grew up on. And I think that the biggest courage is to be open to hear different stories, and to hear about the complicated reality that maybe we were not told about when we're younger. But the real courage, I think, is to look in those stories in the eye, and to be open to hear them, and then to look for all the colors of what happened and what is happening to all the people in this land. And that's the first step to move in order to move on to something better.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, people in general say there is no peace without justice.
For sure.
Actually, I don't believe in just solutions. I'm sorry. I believe in justice as a value. But I don't think that there is a just solution for this conflict. There is a fair solution. What I will add to what Anat said, there is no peace without truth. We have to be truthful to ourselves and to the other.
Yeah, and that's actually something I wanted to ask you both about. Ali, you were saying that we have to recognize and take responsibility for the problems that we bring to the table. And you were saying I take responsibility for the violence on my side. And Einat, I've heard you speak before about the responsibility of Israelis for the occupation and the oppression of Palestinians.
For sure.
I heard that in previous podcasts. But how do we, is that enough for just people like you and Einat and me and the peace activists that are really, like you said, the small minority of people that actually speak up for the large majority? Is that enough, or how large does the recognition and taking responsibility have to be to actually move toward real peace on the ground?
Let's talk takhlas. One, as a response to this recent reality, we need a ceasefire, but more than that, we need a cease conflict. A ceasefire that will be under an international political umbrella that will allow cease conflict as well. That's number one. An immediate aid for sure for everyone. We need a process to start releasing innocent people, prisoners, hostages, whatever you call them, in both sides. And this approach will guarantee and will fuel hope. We need fuel for hope. We have hope, but hope is destroyed. We need to fuel it by practical actions on the ground. Number four, we need a guarantor, an international guarantor, and an Arab guarantor. to get engaged directly in this approach and give 3-5 years that will end by a recognition of two states by every party around the world and every country. Because we need both sides to take responsibility and to stop this competition, but they can, when you do it in a guaranteed way, that it will end not with more settlement like Oslo and not with more suicide bombers, people will get back their hope. And this is the only approach that I see. And we need to get rid of the recent political leadership. Both of them are horrible. Both of them are corrupted. We don't have leaders, we have politicians. Because politicians are just managers of reality fueled by fear, anger, and hate. Leaders, they are managers of future, fueled by hope, responsibility, and humanity at the same time. And this is the difference between both sides. So we need all of that to be on the table with the biggest, most important thing, a massive pressure on political leadership on both sides to sit on the table and take hard decisions, because peace now is something really hard. It's not like any time before. But we have to realize...
It's the most important right now.
Exactly. If we are not able to take the painful injection and to go to the surgery, this wound will be bleeding every year, every month, and every minute.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything. I think you said it wonderfully. And I really want to take this opportunity to speak out and to call to action to everyone who's watching us and who's listening to us, that we need you guys. We're doing as much as we can from here, but a lot of the pressure, either to continue the war, to stop the war, will come from abroad. And we need the activists abroad to pressure their governments to put the people as first of all, put the people in front of their eyes, the Palestinian people and the Israeli people, and not the violence and not the Zionism. We need them to look for the people, to take care of aid, to take care of the hostages, to really pressure and move forward toward what Ali was talking about, a real, true political agreement, a sustainable one that's in the interest of the people and not the politicians. And we need the people that are going out on the streets and the ones who are still sitting at home with themselves. We need you guys to go out and to demand your decision makers wherever you are to stop this war, to let in aid, to bring back the hostages, and the most importantly, pressure them for leading a political agreement, because otherwise we're going to see another war like this in the close future. If we're not going to have a real agreement, just a dry ceasefire is not going to be enough.
Thank you both for those deep and powerful answers. And Einat, what you were just touching on international activists globally, like me here, I'm in the United States. Everybody is horrified by what we see in Gaza in October 7th. We're all horrified by the terrible violence, and we try to grasp onto things that can try to make it stop. And this has been not just this past, few months, it's been for decades that this has been going on. So what a lot of people here in the United States and abroad do is they choose one side or the other, and then they vociferously, aggressively go and protest specifically for that side and against the other side. I've seen this is the biggest way that people in around the world are relating to the conflict. People like me and spiritual people, meditation people, we try to see that everybody is human, and we try to see what's going on both sides and not just taking one side, and keeping our minds open and try to talk about how we can get to peace. But people like me and people that are, Brene Brown also recently made a post about peace, talking about both sides, and got very attacked from it by people on the left that were saying that she wasn't pro-Palestinian enough. And this type of thing happens on both sides. And so people that I don't want to say in the middle, but people who are really just pro-peace and pro-humanity are continuously sort of attacked on social media, whereas people that are one side or the other are just sort of fueling their own social media bubbles. So what do you both have to say about this? Should people take one side or the other and just really fight for that side, or should people take the side of peace and humanity? And which of those is more likely to lead toward peace?
I think you're bringing up a really important point, and I really feel like it's one of the biggest problems right now that people abroad are very invested in. That's amazing, and we need you guys, but people are choosing to see the reality very black and white, and that's very dangerous. We need people on the pro-human rights side, and I think that it's important to say that looking at both sides is not necessarily seeing them as equal, and it doesn't erase all the blame and the responsibility. I think that looking at both sides should mean, as I see it, is seeing where each side is at fault, what are the problems, seeing the bigger picture of also of how we like what led to this point, and seeing that we do have two nations here that are not equal and were never equal. We have one that's the oppressor and one that's the oppressed, but also, of course, considering what happened on October 7th. And I think that's where people should be on the pro-human rights side and amplify the non-violent voices and the humane voices that are talking, first of all, about humanity and are talking about the urgency of a humane solution, not a militaristic one. That's what we need right now.
I just came back from Geneva Human Rights Film Festival. My message was so clear and direct. Be pro-solution. It's easy to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, but be pro-solution. For people to be pro-solution, we activists on the ground, we needed to make it very clear, because it's so confusing, as Anat said. And we're not ready. Our message to the international community, we are not ready to pay more prices of our identity, existence, or security because of the gap that people in the diaspora are creating by taking sides. Yes, we're not equal, but solution will bring us all equal. And if we will not be equal through solution, it's going to be our responsibility, not the other side's responsibility. It's up to us. Finally, we're not calling you to be part of hope. You know, I'm not so much optimistic, but I'm a believer of what I'm doing. We're calling you to adopt it as an ideology, not as a tactic. Nonviolence cannot be nonviolence is like love. You cannot love one tactically. It doesn't work like this. It has to be more than even a strategy. It's a mentality. And we need the international community commitment to solution, especially Jews and Muslims around the world, not in our name. Hate is not in our name. Divide is not in our name. Just imagine, in Washington, D.C., 1 million Jews and Muslims marching the streets to put a pressure in Biden to be pro-solution more than being pro-those or pro-that. This can work, because when Jews stand up for Palestinian, the State Department will listen. When Muslims stand up for Jews, they will listen much better than we speak for ourselves.
Wow. Thank you, both of you. Thank you for those powerful answers. And Ali, I do see the hope in that, in imagining so many Jews and Palestinians or Jews and Muslims in general marching on Washington to be pro-solution. I hope that can happen soon, and I want to see what we can do to get there. But before going to that, I want to finish my question on choosing sides, because this is something that when I respond in the way that you both have, people often, there's this concept that people have that neutrality supports the oppressor. Have either of you heard this or thought about this? And what would you respond to that?
I've heard of this. I think that neutrality can be on the side of the oppressor. I think that we're not calling to neutrality. We are calling for people to be active. I think that neutrality can be dangerous. I think that what we're talking about, again, is the pro-human rights stance, the nonviolent stance that's not extremist, but also does see, like we talked about, it does see the problems and the faults and the pain. It recognizes the pain, it recognizes the inequality, but it strives for a solution for everyone and not just for one of the sides or something like that. So I think it's important to put the focus on that difference of being just like randomly neutral or being actively pro-human rights and actively recognize the pain and what needs to be done considering the power dynamics.
Big part of it is our fault as an activist, because we have never strategized our movement. There is so much within the peace movement itself. We're so divided over opinion and vision for solution. We are so divided over competition of resources. Who's better? I'm the good and these are the bad. There are tens of thousands non-profit and NGOs. Part of them runs by the best politicians for peace who are just the retired one. Just generals and politicians become Mandelas just after they retire, and they open these NGOs and they run for the USAID money and they hire the best staff. They fly five-star and five-class. Number four, we are also able to argue just behaviors. We don't even want to recognize identities. I'm talking about those who are pro-solution. I think the answer is that to strategize, to have a strategic action, massive national plan in both sides. I just came back from a conference I told you in Switzerland. I can mention that. It is kind of confidential, but I can say 74 top leaders, politicians, security figures have just met to try to figure a strategy for both sides, where we will invite the international community to invest in a practical strategic plan for solution and not just sit with each other and have hummus and hugs. This is not the non-violence that I advocate for. It's now serious. We have to create an alternative as a parallel to the alternative of violence, hate, militant extremism. We have to be to that level. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of time.
Yeah, wow, that's very powerful. And, we only have a couple minutes, so I just want to ask you, did they come up with anything that you feel is feasible and hopeful to actually work, that you think will actually work or is likely to be implemented? And are you hopeful that this is going to work to bring peace, Ali?
This is going to be the nightmare that will create the dream.
But do you think that the strategies that the 74 leaders came up with at that conference that you're talking about in Switzerland, do you think that they came up with anything practical that can actually be done?
Yes, we agreed about a charter. Hopefully, it will be published soon. I mean, I cannot allow myself to speak, but we have agreed about principles for the future that any peace agreement has to include. So these are very important principles to be decided. On the top of them is mutual recognition of identity and belonging to the same land.
Yeah, that's very, very powerful. And Einat, are you hopeful that that peace can come in our lifetimes? And are you hopeful for that? Do you believe that that's likely?
I wish. I really wish.
Yeah,
we
I
don't
wish.
hope for it. We work for it. Let us put it
we're
this
working.
way.
We have no other choice. We're working for it, and hopefully it'll come in the near future.
Okay, I wish we had more time to talk, but I really appreciate both of your time. I know that you're doing great work and very important work in a really difficult area and under sometimes feeling like hopeless conditions, forging ahead and doing things that are putting you sometimes in danger, and being very courageous about it. And I really just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, both of you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. We need more people like you. And hopefully through this video and through the meditation magazine Peace issue that's coming out in the summer, we will help create more people like you, more peace activists, human rights activists that are on the side of peace and humanity rather than just taking one side or the other and just fighting it out. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate both of you.